Hello, BookTube. I've got some mail for you today as the day slowly clouds up. It's giving me a strong visual indication that the radar information that I've been seeing about incoming weather is accurate. There's a gigantic, thick band of storms approaching from the west. And when I see that kind of information and I get reports on the ground from places that are right underneath it, I often think, well, it looks bad, but it will completely disappear by the time it gets to Boston. Not a single drop of rain will fall in New England. But this doesn't look like the case. It looks like we're going to get pelted with rain all night long. And I wouldn't have thought it earlier today when it was bright and brassy as high summer. Except now it's completely changed. Now the air is much different. You would never know how late. You would never know how late the day is advanced by the lighting in this video. So we may get lots of weather, but I'm pretty sure that I have succeeded in taking in all the mail ahead of time. There's a periodical and 3 packages, one of which has already been opened, but 2 of which we can open together. The periodical is the New Yorker, with a hideous cover, and there are some things of interest in here, but one thing that I wanted to mention is in the letters page. Someone writes from Brooklyn. Rachel Sim wrote an article in the last issue, I believe, or a couple of issues ago, about deadlines, about what working on a deadline actually does to creativity, what it does for the human brain. Some of her conclusions I disagreed with. Others seem to point in a direction that I have been familiar with for a long time, which is that for some people, working on a deadline not only guarantees their productivity, but improves the quality of what they do. And no real understanding of that either. I myself think that it's not neurological but personal. I think it's trained. I think the smarter high school kids and grade school kids, but especially high school, do leave everything until the last minute. They do wait until the day of the test to study for the test. They do wait until the day of a paper in order to write it. And that trains them, in both the personal sense and the Pavlovian sense, to do their best work under those circumstances, so that by the time they reach adulthood, when really those aren't the best circumstances to do your best work, they really aren't. I know the mythology about well, the latest iteration was Christopher Hitchens, but before him it was Anthony Burgess, and before him it was somebody else. The quasi-mythology that springs up around these massive tobacco addicts, massive alcoholics, where they can be out and about, you know, going from bar to bar from 10 in the morning until 2 in the afternoon, and then their awestruck editors always report that they staggered back to the office, sat down at a manual typewriter, and banged out 1,000 beautiful words on Chateaubriand, or some nonsense like that, that didn't require a single touch from an editor. And you never hear from the sub-editors that did the touching, but nevertheless, despite that mythology, better work is done when you take many whacks at it, when you give it time to germinate. I know that I'm a little bit suspect in saying that, since I myself am a creature of deadline, and there also it would be a question of training. Not so much school as work. I've spent an enormous amount of time in the deadline world of newspapers, and am still in that world. But one way or another, in response to one part of that article, someone from Brooklyn writes in, Rachel Sim touches on a key aspect of modern life, the need to make your routines known. Anyone on social media is probably familiar with the rise and grind types. I certainly am. I laughed out loud when I read that. The people who post about their 5 a.m. boxing classes and their late nights at work with no sign of a life in between, all while raising several kids and running a startup. But lies, or at least gross exaggerations, are the secret to many of these lifestyles. As someone who has founded startups in the past, I have seen conference halls full of idealistic entrepreneurs touting productivity routines that border on the physically impossible. Unfortunately, the glorification of such extreme regimens perpetuates the myth that one has to live that way to be successful. We'd all be better off speaking more frankly about our hashtag productivity. I think that's spot on. I think that's entirely right. If anything, the author of that letter is being generous. Because it's not exaggeration, it is just flat out lying. I am very familiar with the rise and grind crowd on many different aspects of social media on YouTube and on Instagram and even on Twitter, although Twitter is quicker to mock it for the obvious boondoggle that it is. But I'm very familiar with it in school productivity circles. One of you turned me on to the fact that there's a huge ecosystem of YouTube devoted to school productivity, and some of the video makers in that ecosystem have millions of subscribers, are making a comfortable living off lying about productivity. But there's also the rise and grind. Rise and grind actually comes from the fake BroTube fitness industry, fitness influencers, who use that phrase all the time. They use that as a hashtag on Instagram posts all the time, and they are, of course, the biggest liars of them all. they were lucky enough to get the ball rolling, as some of them are honest enough to say it's much easier to stay in shape, or even to give the appearance of staying in shape, than it is to get in shape. Once you have a decent set of muscles, once you have a relatively clear view of some of your abs, it's easier to keep that than it is to get it. Meaning that once you get it, you can coast a lot. And they do. They all do. I have searched diligently for a BroTube Instagram fitness influencer who is the exception that proves the rule, and I haven't found any of them. They all smoke, and they all smoke all the time, except when they're taking pictures. So it's not just well, I'm out at the clubs. It's all the time. It's a big part of their life. They all drink like fishes, drunk every night. They all have rippingly caustic hookahs set up in their houses, and they have, some despised third relative or a younger brother who is ordered in very peremptory tones, in tones that say, do it or I'll have you killed and replaced. Not do it or, I'll be irritated that I have to do it myself, like a brother would say. Instead, do it or I'll have you killed and replaced. That younger brother or that younger cousin is instructed right before some Instagram shot to clear all that crap out of the view. They get it all out of the view. It's why if one of these fitness BroTube Instagram influencers pans around their apartment without that being done, they'll always do it at ceiling level and incredibly fast, so that you don't see all the ashtrays. So see all the empty bourbon bottles or whatever. They lie continuously about rise and grind. They don't rise and grind. Absolutely not. 5 o'clock in the morning, cattle prods couldn't get them out of bed. into bed that they fell into, insensate drunk, burning throat from smoking all day at 3:30 with an underage female fan. So it's all just a complete sham. And I would argue, I think this letter writer probably is hinting at the same thing, counterproductive, oddly enough, ironically enough, counterproductive. So naturally, since I'm a bit on the nosy side, a letter like that coming in on the heels of an article like that makes me want to know what your own productivity regimens are like. Do you have one? I imagine that you all have more of a productivity regimen than you used to. Once upon a time, for the vast bulk of people out there, productivity regimens were imposed from outside. Your productivity regimen was your work, your workplace, where you were expected to be at 7:30 in the morning. That imposes a productivity regimen from the outside. For a lot of people in 2020, that went away, and I'm wondering if a lot of people found themselves needing to substitute a productivity regimen of their own, needing to come up with one, some for the first time in their life. And I'm always curious to know what yours is. But anyway, that was the periodical. Then we have the item that was opened. It's very pretty and very interesting sounding. This is from $2 Radio, and it's called I Will Die in a Foreign Land. And it's by Kalani Pickard. And it is about the Ukrainian uprising. I don't know if do I have a good description here? No, I don't have a description at all here. Just a hymn of praise. Well, it's a pretty thing. This comes out in late October in hardcover. Okay, so this will be a $25 hardcover when it comes out. Let me read you a bit here. In November of 2013, thousands of Ukrainian citizens gathered at Independence Square to protest then-President Yanukovych's failure to sign a referendum with the European Union, opting instead to forge a closer alliance with Vladimir Putin and Russia. The peaceful protests eventually turned violent when military police shot live ammunition into the crowd, killing over 100 civilians. I Will Die in a Foreign Land follows 4 individuals over the course of a volatile Ukrainian winter as their lives are forever changed by the European protests. Katya is a Ukrainian-born American doctor stationed in a makeshift medical clinic in St. Michael's Monastery. Misha is an engineer originally from Pripyat, but who has lived in Kiev since his wife's death from radiation sickness, I'm assuming Chernobyl-related. Slava is a fiery young activist whose past hardships steel her determination in the face of persecution. And Alexander Ivanovich is the former KGB agent, joins the daily protests at Independence Square, clad in a balaclava, where he plays the piano. Let me see, is this translated? Or is this just original? Well, no. Well, Kalani Pickard is extremely young. That is our author. And she holds an MFA in creative writing from Arizona State University. So this is her first novel, Arizona State University. Okay. This is obviously not a translated work, but very intriguing. I remember where I was when I was watching all the news that's going to be reflected in this book. So that is from a small publisher, $2 Radio. Good for her getting this thing published and looking so good. And it comes out in late October, so I won't read it right away, but I wanted to make sure you knew about it in case you're really interested in the subject. It's coming out. And then we've got 2 packages, and then we'll be done. So what have we got? What is this first one? There's some sort of paperwork involved here. What is this paperwork? It's not an invoice, is it? I don't know what to do with invoices except not pay them. There's a piece of paper stuck in here. Very interesting. Yeah, there's a piece of paper. All right, well, it doesn't matter because it doesn't affect the book. Let's look at the book and I'll deal with the piece of paper later. Oh, fantastic. Okay, great. This is by historian James Holland, a historian I really like, a modern historian I really like. This comes out in late November, and it's called Brothers in Arms, One Legendary Tank Regiment's Bloody War from D-Day to VE Day. Brothers in Arms. Fantastic. So what have we got here? In the annals of World War II, certain groups of soldiers stand out, and among the most notable were the Sherwood Rangers. Originally a cavalry unit in the last days of horses in combat, whose officers were landed gentry, leading men who largely worked for them. Leading men who largely worked for them on their own estates. Okay. They were switched to the mechanized cavalry of tanks in 1942. Winning acclaim in the North African campaign, the Sherwood Rangers then spearheaded one of the D-Day landings on Normandy of June 6, 1944, led the way across France, were the first British troops to cross into Germany, and contributed mightily to Germany's surrender in May of 1945. Inspired by Stephen Ambrose's Band of Brothers, acclaimed World War II historian James Holland memorably profiles an extraordinary group of citizen soldiers constantly in harm's way. Fascinating. Fantastic. Okay, so that comes out in the autumn. Again, I won't be reading it right away, but boy, oh boy, is it up my alley. I'm wondering, anybody listening to me have a relative in the Sherwood Rangers, an ancestor? I can't help but wonder. I'm assuming that every single person who participated in the Sherwood Rangers is now dead. But sons, grandsons, don't know what kind of coverage this is going to get. It'll get covered everywhere in the military history press. History and military history magazines will cover this extensively if they haven't already. Maybe this is out in the UK already. I'm not sure what kind of coverage you'll get in the United States. The United States history editors often like to go for broad brush works on World War I or World War II rather than following one regiment. But we shall see. We shall see. I will certainly read it when the time comes. And then we have this. Oh, good Lord! Is this more paperwork? Yes, there is. There's more paperwork on this next one. Then we have this this last package, and then we'll be done. Okay, let's get that out of there. Let's get that out from there. What is this thing? It feels odd. It feels like a box, not a book. Why would it feel that way? It's from a publisher. Oh my God, it is a box. Well, that explains that. Why would somebody send me a box inside an envelope? Why would they do that? Is this maybe Unbound Pages? A really preliminary galley of some kind? No, it's just, oh, fantastic. Okay, no, it was just sent in a box. That's all. Oh, I'm very glad to have this. All right. I don't think I have a pub sheet here, so I'm just gonna have to control myself and try to be at least a little bit fair. This is The Duchess by Wendy Holden, and Wendy Holden is terrific. I did an interview with her on this channel, and we had a blast. And this is her new novel. I believe it's out already in the UK, maybe out already in the US, one way or another. This is about Wallace Warfield Simpson, twice divorced American adventuress who got her claws into the Prince of Wales and who became Edward VIII, and on whose behalf he abdicated. And they went on to live life in the glitzy Monte Carlo demimonde as the Duke and Duchess of Windsor. And Wendy Holden here in this book is attempting a sympathetic portrait of Wallace Warfield Simpson, even though she knows that Steve has an unsympathetic opinion of her. Can you imagine the nerve of some writers disagreeing with Steve? So I'm pleased to say I'm going to read this book. Of course, now that I have it, I'll read it tonight. I'll read it first thing. I'll read it with knives drawn. I am totally opposed to a sympathetic portrait of Wallace Simpson. Totally. I don't believe the historical record supports it, and I don't support it. She was a horrific, metallic, low-class, just horrible gold digger. Now, it's possible that Wendy Holden can change my mind. Certainly, innumerable books in the last 50 years have tried to change my mind on exactly the subject of this person, and failed. It could be that Wendy Holden will succeed. But one way or another, you're going to find out about it front row, because I have a feeling that she's willing to come back on this channel and talk about Wallace Warfield Simpson, and talk about the abdication crisis and maybe their life afterwards, even knowing that she is Daniel entering the lion's den. I have a feeling that because most people realize right away that my bark is worse than my bite. And what fun conversation that will be for the two of us to hash out the subject of Wallace Simpson's in front of you. I think that would be a great deal of fun. As like I was telling her in emails, the only thing missing, the only element missing before we set about talking about this book is that I have to read it. That pesky little technicality. The first thing I have to do is read it. So I'll read this tonight. This is a new novel. This is, Wendy Holden did a book that was terrific called The Governess. About the woman who was the governess to the two royal princesses during the war. Very, very good book. Very much worth your time. And this is her follow-up on Wallace Warfield Simpson. We shall see. It's entirely possible that she will change my mind. No one else has succeeded in doing that. It's entirely possible that she will. If she does, we'll have an interesting conversation about this subject. And if she doesn't, we'll have an even more interesting conversation about this subject, in which I yell at her and she yells back. Well, she's probably too nice to yell. One way or another, it'll be a lot of fun. I haven't done an author interview on this channel in quite some time. I always manage to, I talk about them with authors or with publicists. I try to set them up, and one reason or another, they just don't work. But Wendy Holden, I am willing to move heaven and earth to talk to her again. I'll talk to her for every book she writes, the whole course of her career. I already know, to the extent that I can know, that this is going to be a very good read, just because the last book showed a clear, smooth professional at work in the crafting and writing of emotionally effective historical fiction. That's what I talk about on this channel. If you have credit in the bank of Steve, then that isn't nothing. That doesn't count for nothing. So there's no chance that this can be a failure. on a reading level, on a page-turning level, the questions will be how far out on a limb she's willing to go, believing this horrible gold digger. Because a great deal of the information that most historians use about Wallace Warfield Simpson comes from her, and she almost never told the truth. So, well, we shall see. I won't argue ahead of time. I will read this instead. Oh, that's fantastic. Well, I'll get to this tonight. Fantastic. So that is the Mail. We have The Duchess, the new book by Wendy Holden. This is an author who should be on your radar for historical fiction, if she's not already. And this is her new book. I don't have any information on it. It came in a box, but I don't have any information on, is it out already? Is it coming out soon? Then we have Brothers in Arms by James Holland. Terrific military historian. Really, again, great credit in the bank of Steve. And finally, I Will Die in a Foreign Land by Kalani Pickard. Her debut novel about Ukrainian unrest. So that is the Mail plus the New Yorker. Great. Fantastic. So that's the Mail for today, a day that's getting gloomier by the minute. So I'm going to wrap this up, but I'll be back. Thank you, BookTube.